You are standing in the dark 40,000 years ago, and you have no idea what day it is. Not because you're confused, because the concept doesn't exist yet. There is no Monday, there is no March, there is no year. There is only hunger, cold, heat, and the sky. And somehow, from that blank, timeless darkness, your ancestors built something so powerful that every single choice you make today, when you wake up, when you eat, when you work, when you rest, still runs on a system they invented using nothing but bones, shadows, and the moon. Stick around. Because by the end of this video, you'll never look at a calendar the same way again. And if stories like this pull you in, subscribe, because this channel exists to dig up exactly this kind of forgotten history. Let's start with the obvious question. Why would anyone need a calendar in the first place? You might think early humans just woke up, looked for food, and slept when it got dark. Simple, reactive, no planning required. But that's not what the evidence shows. Survival in the ancient world wasn't about reacting to the moment. It was about predicting the future. When would the herds migrate? When would the rains come? When would the berries ripen? When would the river flood? Get the timing wrong and you starve. Get it right and you eat for months. Time wasn't an abstract idea to early humans. It was the difference between life and death. And the first tool they used to measure it wasn't a machine. It was the moon. In 1960, a geologist named Jean de Heinzelin was digging near the border of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda when he found a small piece of bone. It was the fibula of a baboon about 10 centimeters long, and it was covered in notches, not random scratches, deliberate grouped marks arranged in rows. This became known as the Ishango bone, and it's roughly 20,000 years old. For decades, researchers argued about what it meant. Some thought it was a simple tally stick, a way to count animals or days. Others noticed something stranger. The groupings matched patterns that lined up almost perfectly with the phases of the moon, roughly 29.5 days per cycle. If that interpretation is correct, someone was tracking the moon's rise and fall night after night, carving each observation into bone. That's not counting for the sake of counting. That's the earliest known attempt to measure time itself. The Ishango bone isn't alone. In France, archaeologist Alexander Marshack spent years studying an even older artifact, a small engraved bone plaque found in the Dordogne region, dated to around 30,000 years ago. Under a microscope, Marshack noticed the markings weren't made in one sitting with one tool. They were made in stages with different pressure, different angles over an extended period. His conclusion was radical for the time. He believed early humans were recording the moon's changing shape night by night, using the bone as something close to a diary of the sky. Not every scholar agreed with him, and the debate continues today, but the pattern kept showing up. Across Ice Age Europe, hunter-gatherers were leaving behind bones and stones marked with rhythmic, repeating notches that lined up with lunar cycles far too often to be coincidence. Why the moon, though? Why not the sun? Because the moon is easy. You don't need instruments. You don't need mathematics. You just need eyes and patience. Every night, its shape changes in a way anyone can see. Full, then shrinking, then dark, then growing again, over and over, in a cycle that repeats with almost perfect consistency. For a species without writing, without numbers as we understand them, the moon was the first clock nature ever handed us. And once you can predict the moon, you can predict other things too. Certain animals feed more actively under a full moon. Certain plants respond to lunar cycles. Tides shift with the moon's pull, which matters enormously if you're a coastal community relying on fish and shellfish. Track the moon long enough, and the rest of the natural world starts to make sense. But tracking nights only gets you so far. Real power came when humans started tracking years, and that shift happened when we stopped wandering and started staying in one place. Around 10,000 years ago, as agriculture spread across the Fertile Crescent, something changed in how humans related to time. A hunter-gatherer could survive with rough estimates. Close enough. But a farmer cannot. Plant your seeds 2 weeks too early, and a frost kills everything. Plant 2 weeks too late, and you miss the growing season entirely. Farming demanded precision that hunting and gathering never required, and that pressure is what pushed humans from simply observing the moon to building actual instruments to measure the sun. One of the most staggering examples sits in the Egyptian desert at a site called Nabta Playa. Roughly 6,000 years ago, in what is now one of the driest, most unforgiving parts of the Sahara, ancient people built a circle of standing stones. It looks unremarkable at first glance, just weathered rocks arranged in a loose ring. But researchers studying the alignment discovered that certain stones lined up precisely with the summer solstice, the day the sun reaches its highest point in the sky. In a desert where survival depended entirely on knowing exactly when seasonal rains would arrive, this stone circle wasn't decoration. It was a survival instrument built centuries before Stonehenge, using nothing but careful, repeated observation of where the sun rose across the horizon year after year. Speaking of Stonehenge, its builders were doing something remarkably similar in ocean and thousands of kilometers away. Constructed in stages starting around 5,000 years ago in what is now southern England, its massive stones align with startling accuracy to the sunrise on the summer solstice and the sunset on the winter solstice. Think about what that actually required. No telescopes, no written mathematics as we'd recognize it. Just generations of people standing in the same spot, watching the horizon, marking where the sun rose each morning, and slowly realizing that its position shifted in a predictable, repeating pattern across the year. Then organizing enough labor to drag stones weighing several tons into position to lock that knowledge into the landscape permanently. Stonehenge isn't just a monument. It's a calendar built from rock, designed to outlast the memory of any single person who built it. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the Sumerians were solving the same problem in a completely different way. Living along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers around 5,000 years ago, in some of the first true cities on Earth, they needed a calendar not just for farming, but for organizing trade, taxes, religious festivals, and government. So they built a lunar calendar, dividing the year into 12 months, based on the moon's cycles. But there was a problem. 12 lunar months add up to about 354 days, roughly 11 days short of a full solar year. Left uncorrected, that gap would slowly drag their planting months into the wrong seasons. Their solution was clever. Every few years, they would insert an extra month, what we'd now call a leap month, to realign the calendar with the sun. It wasn't elegant, but it worked, and it's the same basic logic behind why we still add a leap day every 4 years today. The Egyptians, dealing with the predictable annual flooding of the Nile, took a different approach entirely. They noticed that the star we now call Sirius would disappear from the night sky for about 70 days each year, then reappear right around the same time the Nile began its life-giving flood. That single, reliable astronomical event became the anchor of their entire calendar. They built a 365-day solar year, divided into 12 months of 30 days, with 5 extra days added at the end. It was one of the most accurate calendars in the ancient world, and versions of its structure still echo in the calendar hanging on your wall right now. And then there's the calendar built by the Maya over 2,000 years ago in Mesoamerica, which might be the most mathematically sophisticated of them all. They weren't running just one calendar. They were running several, layered on top of each other. A 260-day ritual calendar used for religious and social timing. A 365-day solar calendar for agriculture and seasons, and a long count calendar capable of tracking spans of time stretching across thousands of years into the past and future. These systems interlocked with such mathematical precision that Maya astronomers could predict eclipses and track the movement of Venus with an accuracy that wouldn't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years. This wasn't guesswork. This was rigorous, generational observation, refined and passed down by priests and astronomers who dedicated their entire lives to watching the sky. It wasn't only farmers and city builders who developed sophisticated ways of tracking time. In Australia, Aboriginal communities developed calendar systems that had nothing to do with fixed months at all, and everything to do with reading the living landscape around them. Rather than dividing the year into 12 equal blocks, many groups recognized 5 or 6 seasons, each defined not by a date, but by what was actually happening in the environment. The flowering of a particular tree signaled that a certain fish was running upstream. The arrival of specific birds meant it was time to gather particular roots. This kind of calendar had been refined over tens of thousands of years of continuous observation, making it one of the oldest continuously used timekeeping traditions on the planet, and a reminder that a calendar doesn't have to look like a grid of numbers to work. It just has to reliably answer the question, what should we be doing right now? Across the Pacific in ancient China, timekeeping took yet another form. By at least 3,000 years ago, during the Shang dynasty, diviners were carving questions and observations onto turtle shells and ox bones, some of which recorded astronomical events like eclipses and the movements of particular stars. Over time, this observational tradition matured into a lunisolar calendar, similar in spirit to the Sumerian solution, blending the moon's familiar monthly rhythm with periodic adjustments to keep pace with the solar year. Emperors employed court astronomers whose entire job was watching the sky and reporting back, because in a system where the ruler's authority was tied to cosmic order, an inaccurate calendar wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a crisis of legitimacy. Here's what ties every one of these civilizations together, separated by oceans, deserts, and thousands of years, with no contact between them whatsoever. None of them had satellites, none of them had clocks, none of them had written mathematics in the form we use today. What they had was patience, observation, and memory passed down across generations. Someone watched the sky as a child and passed that knowledge to their children, who passed it to theirs, refining it slightly each time for centuries, until abstract patterns in the sky became fixed, reliable systems anyone could use. The calendar wasn't invented in a single flash of genius by one brilliant person. It was built slowly, painfully, by thousands of anonymous observers who never knew their careful notches on a bone would one day evolve into the numbers on your phone screen right now. And once humans had a calendar, everything changed. Power changed. Whoever could predict the flood, the harvest, or the eclipse held enormous authority over everyone else. Religion changed. Solstices and equinoxes became sacred days, tied to festivals and gods that still echo in modern holidays. Society changed. Cities could coordinate labor, taxation, and trade across huge populations because for the first time, everyone could agree on what day it actually was. The calendar isn't just a tool for tracking time. It's one of the foundational technologies that made complex civilization possible at all. Without it, there's no coordinated farming, no organized religion, no large-scale government, no shared history. Just isolated groups, each living inside their own scattered, disconnected present moment. There's something else worth sitting with here. Inventing a calendar wasn't only about farming schedules or flood predictions. It was also the moment humans first grasped that time itself had a shape. Before that realization, existence was just an endless present, one day bleeding into the next with no larger pattern visible. Once you can mark a cycle, watch it repeat, and predict its return, you gain something almost impossible to overstate: the ability to imagine a future you haven't lived yet and to remember a past in relation to it. That's not a small cognitive shift. That's arguably the birth of history itself. The idea that events happened in an order, that this year connects to last year, and that both connect to whatever comes next. A species that can count moons can eventually count generations, and a species that can count generations can start asking where it came from and where it's going. So the next time you glance at your phone to check the date, remember what that number actually represents. It's not a modern convenience. It's the end result of tens of thousands of years of humans standing outside in the dark, staring at the moon and the stars, trying to make sense of a universe that gave them no instructions. A baboon bone in the Congo, a stone circle in the Sahara, silent giants standing in an English field, priests in Mesoamerica charting the movement of Venus by hand, all of it converging into the 12 months and 365 days you take completely for granted every single day of your life. If this kind of history fascinates you, hit subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of forgotten story this channel is built around. And before you go, I want to know, out of everything in this video, which ancient calendar system surprised you the most? The bone carvings, the desert stone circle, or the layered Maya system? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to hear it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.